Most of the land, I think, in this part of town became federal property with Camp Polk, which the federal government bought about 5,000 acres, in 1918 for a tank training camp that really didn't find much use because the war ended by then. That's when they sold most of that land to the state of North Carolina in 1919, and that's how we got Polk Youth Prison out here. It's how we got the fairgrounds out here.
There was the Polk Youth Detention Center, which was all along Blue Ridge Road for at least 1,000 feet of street frontage. And it had its own kind of contorted history going back to that it became one of several kinds of prisons, which then in the 60s became kind of a, quote, model prison for the reform of young men, which, of course, turned into a racist mess. It was finally moved to Butner much more recently than you would imagine. Into the 2000s. Of course, my work was on the museum campus itself, which was a prison when I first got there. I remember arriving for my interview for chief designer, and I just couldn't believe it. The director picked me up at what was then a really pretty crappy one-horse airport, and we turned onto Blue Ridge Road, and there was this triple barbed wire fence and all African American men behind these barbed wire barriers being paraded between these pretty terrible prison blocks. And that was the first messaging of welcome to your state art museum. There are no historic markers for the racist attitude towards incarceration on the corridor. There was a lot of pressure to tear down every single structure of the prison. There were pressures to just raise the entire thing, including the smokestack, which is where I dug in my heels. So that smokestack is a kind of reverse intervention in that it was not removed. And before the new building was across the street has gone up, it represented the highest point looking east towards the North Carolina shore. And, of course, it's highly symbolic of the transformation of what was there. Raleigh's really good at erasing history. That's one piece that has remained.
This is a great connection place to the rest of the triangle. It's almost the central portion of the triangle. You can get from anywhere from here very easily, but you should be able to do it in a multimodal fashion. You've got Upstead State Park, which takes up a lot of the acreage here, which is just a great place to spend time, and it makes you think that you're out of the city. I think that's part of it. It's sort of the dividing point between, urban and rural. That's one of the more beautiful things about this part of town.
One kind of funny thing about the corridor is that it's got these big institutional nodes, but it's like also not a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Very few residential areas within it. Very low density is both positive and a negative. The negative, I think, is pretty obvious that there's sort of no one home. It also means that there's more open opportunity to begin to intentionally transform it. Physical and environmental overlay to this whole discussion that is being discussed and needs to be, in my opinion, more widely embraced.
When you imagine, 10, 15 years down the line, what do you want to feel?
Connectivity, I hope, is going to be a key component. That's one of our goals with is really to connect the dots here in this district. We started this whole process by trying to bring the stakeholders together, all the master plans, all the stakeholders of the the major institutions were all focused away from the street, and our goal was to bring it towards the street, to try to think, how do you interact with all these other sites and how do you create synergy?
I think that it's nice to know that you're in a city that cares about its environment, and cares about its aesthetics, and has some kind of vision for it that intersects well with providing the basic needs of good information and shelter. And that can be expressed in many ways. And in many of our cities, you see that expressed in terms of capitalism and advertising, but I've also seen it in terms of aesthetic or playful interventions or information. I want to see them as interesting places to be and to connect with other people that are also waiting for the bus. And if it can help to be part of cohesion for a city, I think that's really important. It's so low cost to experiment on that level, to embrace an ethos of experimentation. I think at that level is excellent, an excellent vehicle and bait for the project, where it's not a fixed thing, but it's an open-ended dialogue. If they embrace new ideas once every year or every few months or whatever it is, they can become a really interesting pearls along the necklace of that reinforce that design. That ethos.